Meeting Gorbachev is a documentary directed by André and Werner Herzog. It's a sit-down interview between the legendary filmmaker Werner Herzog and the probably even more legendary political figure Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the last president of the USSR before it sort of blew up, and we are in the world that we live now. The film goes through your typical sort of biopic, biography of his life, but it mostly covers his tenure as president of the USSR in the 80s up until 1991. The film very much focuses on his major accomplishment, whether that be denuclearization and reducing the number of nuclear warheads, opening up the Soviet Union to the rest of the world, perestroika, glasnost, all of these things that led to ultimately the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Europe, particularly the German reunification in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall. The film paints Gorbachev in an extremely sympathetic and positive light. Werner Herzog is clearly an admirer of the man. He even says it as so. I mean, he goes so far as to say to him directly, "I love you." I love you, he says, because you allowed the reunification of Germany to go through peacefully. And that's really something that you have to take into account. First of all, is if the filmmaker is open and honest about what his viewpoint is, what his motive is, then I'm absolutely fine with the fact that the film doesn't really explore maybe some of the darker aspects of Gorbachev. And of course, I'm not German, but it's absolutely clear that for Germans, the idea of reunification was such a huge, almost impossible dream. The fact that it was able to go down peacefully and the fact that it was done successfully is just a huge reason why Gorbachev is, revered and admired in Europe, but in Germany in particular. One thing the film covers that I think is really interesting is the story behind the fall of the Soviet Union. Because essentially in the West, all we learn is that, the Berlin Wall fell and then the Soviet Union disappeared and yay democracy, yay capitalism. But what I didn't know was about the attempted coup that had taken place while Gorbachev was on holiday, and some higher-ups in the Communist Party that weren't so thrilled with his vision of the world tried to seize power, that there was essentially a popular uprising to keep Gorbachev in power and prevent this coup from happening, and that was the time and place where Boris Yeltsin, who was president of Russia at the time and who would become president of independent Russia in the following months, that really was when he made his political play. And that's sort of when really everything fell into place for these states to break away from the Union and the Soviet Union to disappear. Gorbachev really is a tragic figure. There's this meteoric rise, this amazing ascension, and some really powerful moments, and then a very tragic fall, which makes him extremely cinematic. Of course, I'm sure it would have been really interesting to explore some more of the dirt, some more of the darkness within the character, within what was going on in the Soviet Union at the time. Chernobyl, for example, is barely touched upon, but that's not what Herzog really wants to do, so he's the director, he decides. And also at this point, Gorbachev is an 87-year-old man. I think if you wanted to do something a little more aggressive, something that dived more into those aspects of the character, and that was less a celebration of the man's achievements, then now is not the time to do it. Pretty simple documentary overall, although there are some, Werner Herzog-isms here and there. Particularly, I think the most evident one would be when there is a news report in Austria about how to get rid of slugs in your lettuce by using beer, and Herzog really dives into the detail of that, specifically during a time when there's this huge political story about a barbed wire on the border between Austria and Hungary being taken down. As a European, obviously the world that we live in today, was only made possible because there were politicians like Gorbachev in power at a time when the Soviet Union, but the world desperately, desperately needed it. And for some reason, we're trying to dismantle that Europe right now, but that's beside the point. Film really portrays somebody that was open, that was cultured, that was smart, that was diplomatic, and that was just a modern politician that was desperately needed. And I think that really comes through within the interview. There's this really striking moment when Gorbachev talks about the end of the Cold War and says something that really resonated with me and that I think is really powerful, and that just shows what kind of person he is, and that, yes, he really does grasp things globally and is a very, very smart individual. He says the United States, the US, they think they won the Cold War and it went to their heads. In reality, we all won. And that just resonates so true today. I mean, no matter what criticisms, and there are plenty you want to lay on Reagan and Gorbachev, they were at least, smart, thoughtful, diplomatic individuals that didn't want to destroy the world in some nuclear apocalypse. And when you look at the state of politics today, when you look at who's at the head of those states today, that really doesn't seem like that's the case anymore. And that makes this film probably really important. That makes the figure of Gorbachev really important at this period right now in this time. And that makes the future seem very, very frightening. So as always, thanks very much for watching the video. Be sure to hit the like button if you like the review. Subscribe if you're new. And until next time, see ya.